Welcome to Things You Don't Know.
I'm glad to be here with my good friend and co-host, Dr. Deneen. Today, we're going to talk about something that's kind of difficult. It's about September the 11th, 2001, one of the most traumatic days in modern American history.
I'm always glad to be with my good friend and mentor, Dr. Weaver, here. On that unforgettable, horrible day, nearly 3,000 people were killed in the attacks on the World Trade Center, the Pentagon, and on Flight 93, which crashed in Pennsylvania after passengers resisted the hijackers. It was a day of horror, courage, confusion, and grief.
But today, we want to focus on something that is often misunderstood. Who actually carried out the attacks? Who did not carry out the attacks? And why so much of the American public reached or reacted with fear, suspicion, and sometimes hysteria?
That's a very important distinction. The 9/11 attacks were carried out by Al Qaeda, a radical terrorist organization. They were not, in the official public record, a conventional military attack plotted by any foreign government against the United States.
Yeah, and Dr. Deneen, that distinction really matters, right? And let's just not be so blind as to not see the log in our own eye. Just as the KKK or the Ku Klux Klan and the Proud Boys do not represent the United States as a country, the 9/11 terrorists did not represent an entire nation, an entire religion, or an entire civilization, right, Dr.
You're,
Deneen?
you're quite correct, Dr. Weaver. We need to establish what happened that awful day. Before we get into the psychology of public fear, let's briefly establish the historical facts.
Okay. On the morning of September 11th, 2001, 19 terrorists hacked four commercial airplanes. Two planes were flown into the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center in New York City. A third plane struck the Pentagon in Arlington, Virginia. The fourth plane, United Flight 93, crashed in a field near Shanksville, Pennsylvania, after passengers fought back.
And the symbolic nature of the targets was unmistakable. The World Trade Center represented the ultimate symbol of American economic power. The Pentagon represented American military power. And many believe Flight 93 may have been headed toward the Capitol or the White House, the ultimate symbols of American government authority.
Yes, the attacks were designed not only to kill, but to terrify. Terrorism is violence used as communication. It sends a message through fear. It tries to make a population feel unsafe, vulnerable, and unable to trust normal life.
And that is exactly what happened. Planes were grounded, offices closed, people watched the same terrible footage over and over. Rumors spread, families called loved ones, schools, airports, federal buildings, and cities entered a state of emergency.
And the fear was not irrational at first. Americans did not know whether more attacks were coming. For a while, no one knew how large the plot was, whether other planes were involved, or whether there would be additional attacks.
Now we come to the central point. The attacks were carried out by Al Qaeda. That organization was led by Osama bin Laden and operated across national borders.
Al Qaeda was not and is not a country. It was not the official government of Saudi Arabia, Afghanistan, Iraq, or Iran, or any other nation. It was a radical, violent organization with recruits and supporters from a whole bunch of different places.
And that is where public understanding often broke down. Many Americans heard the hijackers were from Saudi Arabia, that Al Qaeda had training camps in Afghanistan, and that the Taliban regime gave Al Qaeda sanctuary. Then those separate facts blurred together.
Indeed, the Taliban government in Afghanistan gave Al Qaeda safe haven. That's true. That made Afghanistan central to the American response. But that is not the same thing as saying the Afghan people planned 9/11, is not the same thing as saying a whole country committed the crime.
Certainly not, and it is definitely not the same thing as saying the followers of Islam committed the crime. Terrorists use religion the way other extremists use nationalism, race, ideology, or conspiracy theories. They take a larger identity and twist it into a weapon.
That is a key point. We understand this more clearly when we look at our own society. The KKK has used Christianity, white identity, and American symbols. But we do not say the United States as a nation, is the Klan. We do not say every Christian is the Klan. We do not say every white American is the Klan. Another organization, the Proud Boys, is housed and has sanctuary here and allowed to function in the United States of America. It could be argued tried to overthrow the government. Remember the riots? And neither one of these groups represent the majority of citizens of the United States. But a democratic republic must allow diversity, must entertain differences of opinions and talk about them and deal with them. Now, I'm not an advocate of any kind of violence and, trying to overthrow the government or doing these horrible things. Not at all. I am an advocate of talking, using your mind, being reasonable. Right, Dr. Deneen?
That's the foundation of any free society, and that same principle of allowing diversity and different opinions certainly applies here. Al Qaeda used Islamic language, but it did not represent Muslims as a whole. It did not represent every Arab person. It did not represent every Afghan, every Saudi, every Iranian, every Middle Eastern person, and certainly not every immigrant.
And in fact, Al Qaeda murdered Muslims in many countries. Uh huh. Yes, murdered Muslims in many countries. Radical extremist movements often kill the very people they claim to defend. Don't we see that here too?
Absolutely. Dr. Weaver, let's slow this down because it can become confusing. If Al Qaeda was operating from Afghanistan and the Taliban, which is an Islamic government, allowed that, why shouldn't people say Afghanistan attacked America?
Well, because governments, populations, and terrorist networks are different things. The Taliban regime bore responsibility for harboring Al Qaeda. That's a serious matter for sure. But ordinary Afghan people did not plan the attacks. Many Afghans themselves were victims of the Taliban.
So, if I'm understanding you correctly, the difference is between a radical organization, the regime that shelters it, and the general innocent population of the country.
Yes. And we need those distinctions. We need to understand them. Otherwise, we punish whole peoples for the actions of extremists. Should we attack the United States because we harbor the KKK? Should we attack the United States because the Proud Boys and others tried to take over the government? Should we do that?
No.
No. That is how fear becomes prejudice.
Very well put. And the Saudi issue also became complicated. 15 of the 19 hijackers were Saudi nationals, but nationality does not automatically equal government responsibility.
Yes, that's right. If an American commits a terrorist act overseas, that does not automatically mean the United States government ordered it. If a domestic extremist commits violence here, we do not say the entire United States population is guilty.
That is where your analogy to the KKK and the Proud Boys becomes very useful. Extremist groups can arise inside a country without representing the country.
Exactly. A country can produce extremists. A society can have radical networks. Individuals in a country may assist those networks. But that is not the same as saying the whole country, the whole people, or the whole religion committed the act.
Now let's talk about the American public. After 9/11, people were grieving, frightened, confused, and angry. Some reactions were understandable, others became hysterical and even dangerous.
The word hysteria can sound rather insulting, so let's define it carefully. We're talking about a public state of fear in which emotions overwhelm careful judgment. People begin making broad, unsupported conclusions. They start treating suspicion as evidence.
And after 9/11, some Americans began to falsely assume that Muslims, Arabs, Sikhs, Jainists, South Asians, or people who just generally looked Middle Eastern, whatever that is, were dangerous.
Oh, yeah, anybody that's different from us can't be okay, right? That was one of the ugliest consequences. People who had nothing to do with 9/11 were harassed, threatened, assaulted, or discriminated against. Some were American citizens, some were immigrants, some were not Muslim at all, but were targeted because of turbans, beards, names, accents, or skin color.
This is known as the psychology of overgeneralization. The mind takes one very frightening event and creates a false rule. They attacked us, so people who resemble them must be dangerous. It happened with the Japanese in this country after World War II.
Yes, indeed, it did. So that false rule feels protective. It gives the frightened people a target, but it is morally wrong and factually wrong also.
Indeed, and ironically, it also helps terrorists. Terrorist organizations often want societies to overreact. They want division. They want Muslims in Western countries to feel hated and excluded. They want to say, see, we're right. The West hates you. Prejudice can become terrorist propaganda.
Terrorist propaganda. Wow, what a way to say that, Dr. Dean. And you're right. So let's look at why false beliefs spread so quickly after 9/11.
Well, the first reason, Dr. Weaver, is trauma. When a population experiences a shocking attack like 9/11, people want an explanation immediately. They want certainty before certainty is available.
Yeah, that is true psychologically. The brain does not like uncertainty. In a crisis, people often prefer a simple wrong answer over a complicated, incomplete, but factual answer.
Americans in general hate ambiguity. Secondly, there was repeated exposure. The American people watched the towers fall again and again on television. That repetition made the danger feel present even after the immediate attacks were over.
Uh, that is called the availability effect. If an image is vivid and repeated, the brain treats it as more likely to happen again. People begin to imagine planes falling from the sky, buildings collapsing, cities being attacked, and when the actual probability of any one person being attacked actually remains kind of low.
Third, this enemy was difficult to understand. Al Qaeda, it means the base in Arabic, was not a traditional army in a uniform. It was an international network. It moved through countries, charities, training camps, religious rhetoric, private funding, and secret cells.
Americans were used to thinking in terms of countries. Germany attacked, Japan attacked, the Soviet Union threatened. But Al Qaeda did not fit that older mental model. So many people tried to force it into that model anyway.
That's why some Americans, look for a country to blame. Afghanistan, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Iran, the categories and distinctions blurred.
And Iraq became one of the most damaging examples. Many Americans came to believe Saddam Hussein had something to do with 9/11, even though that belief was not supported by the evidence. Fear, political messaging, and the general phrase war on terror helped blur unrelated threats together.
There's a fourth reason. Many Americans had a limited knowledge of Islam, the territory of the Middle East and South Asia, or the differences among Arabs, Persians, Afghans, Sikhs, Pakistanis, Jainists, Muslims, Hindus, and many others.
Ignorance does not always mean stupidity. Sometimes it just means people were never taught the distinctions. But after 9/11, that ignorance became dangerous because fear filled in the blanks.
Dr. Weaver, how much responsibility should we place on the media?
Some, but not all. The media had a duty to report a national catastrophe, but 24-hour news also created a constant emergency atmosphere. Even when no new facts were available, the coverage continued.
And speculation filled the empty space.
Exactly. When people repeatedly hear terror, Islamic extremism, Middle East, Afghanistan, Saudi, Iraq, and weapons of mass destruction, the words can begin to cluster together in the public mind, even when the facts are distinct.
Political language mattered too. The phrase war on terror was emotionally very powerful, but it was also vague. Terror is a tactic, not a country. You can fight terrorist organizations, but terror itself is not a government that you can defeat in a surrender ceremony.
Yeah, that's well put. That vagueness made it easier to expand the conflict. It also made it easier for some Americans to suspect anyone associated, however loosely, with the regions, religions, or appearances they connected to the attacks.
So public fear was shaped by trauma, media repetition, limited knowledge, political framing, and the human desire for a simple Star Wars like enemy.
Yes, Dr. Deneen, you are right. And we should spend some time on the people who paid a price for this hysteria.
Certainly, yes. Muslim Americans, of course, Arabs of different religious backgrounds, Sikh Americans, South Asian Americans, and many others were often treated as suspects. Some were attacked, some were bullied in schools, some were profiled in airports, some had their businesses vandalized, some were told to go home, even though America had always been their home.
And this is one of the great moral tests after any national trauma. Can a country defend itself without betraying its own principles?
Dr. Weaver, that's the question. The United States certainly had a right to pursue Al Qaeda. It had a responsibility to protect its people. But protection must be based on evidence, not fear, ethnicity, religious practice, clothing, or accents.
Fear can make people feel justified in abandoning fairness. But fairness is most important when fear is strongest.
That's a very powerful point, Dr. Weaver. Civil liberties are easy to defend in calm times. The test comes when people are afraid. Now, if I may, we need to address other theories, and the need for control, we need to address what would be called conspiracy theories. After 9/11, many unsupported claims circulated that the most controversial and wrong was that the attacks were deliberately and secretly staged, that the buildings themselves were demolished in a controlled demolition, that entire governments must have planned everything, or that certain groups even had advanced knowledge.
Conspiracy theories often grow after traumatic events because they provide a strange kind of comfort. They make chaos feel organized. If someone secretly controlled everything, then the world may feel less random.
That sounds backward, but psychologically it makes sense. Random vulnerability and ambiguity is terrifying. A conspiracy theory says there is a hidden order in back of all your problems. Even if that hidden order is frightening, it can feel and be more understandable in chaos.
But evidence still matters here, Dr. Deneen, right?
It does.
Asking questions is legitimate. Investigating intelligence failures is legitimate. Examining foreign support networks is legitimate. But jumping from unanswered questions to unsupported certainty is not investigation. It is emotional reasoning.
And emotional reasoning was everywhere after 9/11. People wanted someone to blame. Sometimes they blamed the right people, Al Qaeda. Sometimes they blamed too broadly Arabs, Muslims, immigrants in general, countries, or other kinds of political opponents.
That is why we need a disciplined distinction between suspicion, evidence, and proof.
So, what should we learn from 9/11 beyond the obvious lesson that terrorism is dangerous?
Well, first, we should learn that terrorism is committed by specific people and organizations. We must identify them accurately.
Second, we must learn that trauma can distort public judgment.
That is leads us to the third one. We should learn that a radical group does not represent an entire country, religion, or people.
And fourthly, we should learn that fear can be manipulated. It can be used to justify war, prejudice, surveillance, detention, and suspicion of innocent people.
The goal is not to minimize the danger of Al Qaeda. No, the danger was real. The victims were real. The grief was real. The heroism of firefighters, police, medical workers, passengers, and ordinary citizens was real.
But the moral lesson, my friends, is also real. Grief does not excuse bigotry, fear does not excuse falsehood, and patriotism does not require blaming innocent people.
Well said, Dr. Deneen. A serious society must be able to do two things at once: defend itself firmly, yes, absolutely, and think clearly. So critical, so critical. Think clearly.
Sadly, that's a difficult task. September 11th was a day of mass murder, national trauma, and lasting consequence. But it was not an attack by an entire people. It was not an attack by a religion. It was not proof that every person from a certain region was automatically dangerous.
It was a work of a radical terrorist organization that exploited religion, politics, resentment, and violence. And in the aftermath, America faced not only the threat of terrorism, but the danger of losing moral clarity in the face of fear.
That may be one of the hardest lessons of history. When we are most afraid, we are also most vulnerable to bad and short sighted thinking.
And that is exactly when we most need evidence, restraint, compassion, and courage.
Yes, if you like our podcast, leave a like and a comment. I know this is certainly not a pleasant topic, but it's a vital one. We have many other wonderful things coming up. Please come back and join us again soon.
Yeah, actually, one of the things that we're going to be doing soon, at least I hope to, is something really focused on immigrants. I think it's an important topic.
I'm
So listen,
I'm looking
thanks.
forward to that.
Yeah, so thanks for listening, guys. Come on back and join us again, okay? Bye.